This is Part 2, Episode 60. Electrolux waved the staff at him and chanted his incantations more resoundingly. He lifted the staff up high in the air, and then slowly and steadily outlined the shape of golden runes. Hui Yuhao also lifted his right hand as he chanted on the other side. His index finger turned illusory in the air. He seemed to be imitating Electrolux's actions. Electrolux revealed a comforted look in his eyes. The golden runes he created started to drift towards the snow pearl, and rapidly fused with them. Strangely, the snow pearl seemed to transform after the runes were fused in. The power inside it was still as violent as ever, but it didn't try to burst out of the pearl. Rune after rune was fused into the snow pearl, making the snow pearl less and less agitated. However, it was still slowly growing, inch by inch. When it had first appeared, it was only the size of an infant's fist. Now, however, it was as big as an apple, and was slowly growing to the size of a watermelon. Its regular spherical shape had also become more and more irregular. Something seemed to be squirming inside. Electrolux wore a slight smile on his face, but his body was becoming more illusory by the moment. The snow pearl slowly showed a strange scene. Something seemed to be moving underneath the golden, transparent film. Upon closer inspection, it seemed like a human embryo. Yuhao, blood. Electrolux shouted. Hui Yuhao opened his eyes wide and spat out fresh blood, which landed on the snow pearl. Suddenly, the force within the embryo seemed to stabilize and calm down. It slowly turned into a ball of golden light that flew towards Hui Yuhao. The two sect masters stopped restricting it, because Electrolux gestured at them not to do so. The last golden rune also flew out of Electrolux's hand and landed accurately on the snow pearl, which had absorbed Hui Yuhao's blood and slowly turned milky white. As golden light flashed, the snow pearl drifted in front of Hui Yuhao. The staff in Electrolux's hand turned into a golden streak of light, which flew out and went into Hui Yuhao's Eye of Destiny. Small, golden whirlpools appeared within the Eye of Destiny. Then a golden light expanded, and easily engulfed the snow pearl embryo. As lights flashed, the snow pearl disappeared. Teacher. Hui Yuhao's body jerked. Blood seeped out of his pores. His face became even paler. He was subjected to the rebound from immense forces. When everything ended, he was about to succumb to his injuries. Electrolux smiled. Although the remnants of my divine senses can't store all my past memories, I know that you're not my only disciple. However, you are very outstanding, and I'm very pleased with you. You must remember never to be extreme. If one's heart is upright, they will be upright. No matter what strength it is, it'll only be used for appropriate purposes in the hands of the just. Teacher. Tears streamed down from Hui Yuhao's eyes. Even though his internal organs were on fire and blood was seeping out of his pores, he still struggled to crawl towards Electrolux. Of course he knew what strength Electrolux was using. The two golden flares had played decisive roles. They were the flames of Electrolux's divine sense. The remnants of his divine sense had been the fuel for the flames. The Calamity Necromancer had used the last of his divine sense to save them. However, he didn't inform anyone before doing this. Electrolux smiled and said, if you reach that stage one day, this world might really possess conditions that permit the existence of gods. You might find the remnants of my divine sense somewhere, or use the delicate connection that we have to restore the flame of my divine sense. I'll be waiting for that day. Don't be sad. To me, it's not my first time dying. What's so scary about death? Didn't we just create a new form of life? I'm very happy. Gentlemen, please help me. His last sentence was directed at the two sect masters. The sect master lifted Hui Yuhao up from the ground. Before Hui Yuhao could catch a glimpse of what he did next, he passed out. The strength of a god. You used the strength of a god just now. The second sect master couldn't help but ask. At this point, everything in the room had returned to normal. Only, now the frigid jade essence bed had lost its original icy qualities and become a rock. Electrolux nodded slightly. I can also feel the auras of gods from your bodies. There's also a sense of righteousness. I don't have much time to speak anymore. Gentlemen, please trust my judgment. My disciple is kind and sincere. He'll be a good partner. Don't put him in a hard spot anymore, and help me comfort him. You can tell him how he can resurrect me from your perspectives. Electrolux smiled as he spoke till here and slowly drifted to the window. He looked far away with his elderly gaze. The sea of clouds around Clear Sky Peak was slowly being restored after being scattered by the terrifying auras earlier. He revealed a slight smile as he saw this magnificent view. This was probably the last time he would gaze upon this world. The room was very quiet. Everything was returning to normal, as if nothing had happened at all. The sect master and second sect master were looking silently at his golden figure. It was slowly dimming. A look of respect was revealed in their eyes. Although they had only interacted with him for a short period of time, they knew that he had just sacrificed his life to save Hu Yuhao. Electrolux was gazing into the distance, but his gaze turned dimmer and dimmer. He eventually turned into a spot of golden light that drifted towards Hu Yuhao's forehead. It entered his head and disappeared. A strange-looking, greyish soul ring slowly rose from Hu Yuhao's body. When this soul ring appeared, Electrolux's figure flashed for an instant before disappearing. When his visage flashed, his eyes were no longer shining. The second sect master was shocked as he asked, "This soul ring is grey." The sect master sighed and looked at Hu Yuhao in his arms. He said, "Although I don't know the kind of experiences that divine sense from another world has gone through, I could sense the pure light and the vicissitudes of life from him. It's really this brat's fortune to have such a teacher. This grey soul ring is possibly the last shred of strength that his teacher left behind for him." The second sect master revealed an upset look on his face and muttered, "Elder brother, I miss our past life. However, we still can't return to those days." The sect master smiled and said, "There are both losses and gains. We're already quite fortunate. In fact, I'm actually eager to see what kind of existence we've just created. The force that erupted in Hu Yuhao's body should belong to a soul beast, which is possibly a strong being that sealed their own powers. The seal must have encountered some kind of problem, thus leading to the risks earlier. It's really our responsibility." As he spoke, he pointed to the dim frigid jade essence bed. The second sect master snapped, "This is also considered our responsibility. We didn't let him cultivate here, and one of our treasures was destroyed. If not for Wang Dong, I'd make him compensate us for it, ha ha." The sect master laughed loudly and said, "All right, what's there to be calculative about? Go and tell everyone to return since the problem has been resolved." Hu Yuhao was in a deep sleep. He only felt that he'd lost something important. Pain, sorrow and other emotions engulfed him in his dreams. As he was struggling to wake from his dream, a streak of light appeared in front of him. An elegant and ravishing beauty in a long blue dress appeared and snuggled beside him. Her hair and eyes were pinkish blue, and she wore a look of anguish in her eyes. "What? Is that the goddess of light?" Hu Yuhao wanted to grab hold of her, but he realized that he couldn't do anything. The sorrow that he felt also slowly faded as the goddess of light appeared. The goddess of light brought positivity into his mind and allowed him to relax in his sleep. There seemed to be a gentle singing voice comforting his sorrowful spirit. After some time, Hu Yuhao woke from his sleep. When he awoke, he first felt the tremendous changes to his spiritual sea. At least 2/3 of his vast spiritual sea had dried up. A strong feeling of weakness made it difficult for him to even open his eyes. His passageways were aching greatly too. His soul power was still there, but its circulation was very messy. If not for the purity of his mysterious heaven technique, he would have been in great danger of losing control of what was left over. His body was in an even worse condition than it had been when he had helped Ju Zi. Back then, he had only suffered external injuries. However, he'd sustained internal injuries this time, including injuries to his spirit and mind. But the pain that came from his body made it difficult for him to think. The only thing he could do now was slowly recover from his injuries. He struggled to summon his spiritual power to control the circulation of his soul power. However, he almost fell unconscious a few times throughout even this simple process. Although he couldn't think deeply, he could still remember everything he had lost. That was why he still remained resolute and continued to forcibly control his soul power. His mysterious heaven technique and soul power eventually managed to circulate normally, and everything slowly returned to peak conditions. His passageways weren't too critically damaged, and there was even another wave of thick spiritual energy fused within his body that coordinated with the circulation of the mysterious heaven technique. The relaxation of his body also helped him gradually recover his spiritual energy. However, Hu Yuhao was appalled to discover that his spiritual sea had been damaged to such a large extent. It was like his spiritual reservoir had shrunk to 1/3 its original size, causing his spiritual power to decrease greatly. Fortunately, his understanding of spiritual power still existed, and his control hadn't faltered. As he worked hard to control and stimulate his spiritual sea, it managed to restore its circulation. The weakness that he felt also gradually faded away. He could also sense his Eye of Destiny, where his second mental sea was. His Eye of Destiny was the only part of his body that was unhurt. He heaved a sigh of relief because of this. If even his Eye of Destiny was hurt, his cultivation would probably fall by at least 30%. Hu Yuhao slowly discovered something strange. It wasn't entirely bad news everywhere. A ball of golden light was floating in his Eye of Destiny. A golden embryo was gestating within this ball of light. It seemed to be unable to penetrate the layer of film and come out. He could also clearly sense that the part of his spiritual power that had disappeared seemed to be in this golden embryo. The strange golden embryo seemed to be closely linked to him. This feeling was very weird. It was like another him was developing in his body. But this other self didn't just possess his aura, it also possessed an aura that he was familiar with. His spiritual sea was empty. He could only subtly sense 2 spiritual imprints in it, but they seemed to have been greatly hurt, and had entered a deep sleep. 2. Why were there only 2 left? In fact, Hu Yuhao's chanting had been guided by Electrolux, who was also chanting incantations. At that point in time, he had been under Electrolux's control. He had entered a half-conscious state, and remembered very little of what happened. I'm not dead. This was Hu Yuhao's first reaction, after he could slowly control his spiritual sea. However, he was extremely mournful when he realized that there were only 2 spiritual imprints asleep in his spiritual sea. He didn't know who they were, but the 2 that had disappeared were probably. As he thought till here, Hu Yuhao only felt that he was completely engulfed in sorrow. He felt extreme heartache. At this point, a streak of golden light shot out of his Eye of Destiny and landed in his spiritual sea. The golden light shone, and a familiar aura spread. Its appearance caught immediately Hu Yuhao's attention. Teacher! Hu Yuhao was surprised as he shouted. This aura was very familiar, it belonged to Elder Yi. The Eye of Destiny shot out a golden beam of light. Electrolux's dim golden figure appeared in front of Hu Yuhao. Yuhao, you should be fully awake when you see this. We were really lucky this time. I'm glad to tell you that we've succeeded. We have created a special energy body in your Eye of Destiny that has never before existed in your world. I believe you can sense its presence. Yuhao, do you know when I decided to pass down all my research on necromancy to you? It was when your other teacher, the Dragon Dolor Elder Mu, passed away. Your sorrow at that time touched me, and I truly saw you as my disciple. Right now, I have no choice but to leave you. Although I don't want to tell you the truth, there are some things that you have to bear. It was purely an accident that the snow pearl combusted. No one should bear responsibility for that incident. However, it has also led to this extreme fusion. This is probably fate, or a result of the end of those remnants of my divine sense. I burned my own divine sense and sealed you, the Snow Empress, and a shred of my divine sense into a single entity. I used the life power of the embryo in the snow pearl to create a special life form that won't disappear, even though it doesn't have a true body. To a certain extent, it's a combination between the Snow Empress' spiritual sense and her strength, as well as your blood. This life form doesn't have a physical body, but it will have the same effect as your soul rings. It might even be stronger than your soul rings. Even I'm not sure how many of your soul rings it'll equal after it's completed. Since we created it together, let's give it a name. Let's call it Spirit. Even though I believe Spirit will appear again in this world in the future, the Snow Empress will still be of the highest level. It will be another ability that you can use apart from soul rings and soul bones. It can replace your soul rings, but it definitely won't be the same as a soul ring. I'm certain that at least half of the Snow Empress' spiritual sense dissipated during the fusion process. Furthermore, her body will likely be stuck at a very young age during the process of rebirth. She'll also be extremely submissive towards you. That's because I used a contract to shape her to be that way during the fusion process. She will listen to you. When Mu En left, he left a present for you. Consider this Snow Emperor spirit my gift to you. Don't be saddened of my departure. To me, this can be considered a form of release. When you reach my level one day, you'll discover that the meaning of life is beyond just death. I've seen too many deaths in my life. I've also resurrected others before. To me, this is just a transformation of my soul. Furthermore, I won't be leaving you entirely. When I fused with you, a part of my divine sense assimilated with you. Before I leave, I will remove the seal on the part of my divine sense that assimilated with you. It could be said that you now possess a third martial soul. Call this martial soul the divine law of necromancy. Take it as a remembrance of my existence. If you become a god one day, I believe that you can use it to find the rest of my divine sense in some other place. You can even resurrect my divine sense and create a new me. Don't be shocked by that. There's nothing impossible in this world. If you're capable enough, you'll be able to succeed. After a round of transformation, the Snow Emperor's spirit will need to incubate. It might be a few days, but it could also be a few months. Your spiritual sea was critically damaged from her formation. You'll need a long time to recover, but don't be impatient. Your spiritual origin wasn't affected. When Sky Dream and the Ice Empress wake up, you'll succeed. Your soul power should be at rank 50 now. After this transformation, both the Ice Empress and Sky Dream will be asleep for quite some time. You'll need to rely on your own strength from now on. I believe that you'll be able to reach that level. I don't dare to call myself a god, but I hope that my disciple will be able to. You'll be my greatest pride if you manage to do so, kid. The strong must be brave and tough, and they never cry. Crying is a sign of weakness. I hope that you can accept everything calmly. Finally, I used the last bit of strength from my divine sense to release my memories with all of you before I left. If there are still remnants of my divine sense in other places, they'll be informed. I am waiting for you to find them. If you want to see me earlier, you must remember to work hard at your cultivation. Goodbye, Yu Hao. His voice ended here, and his golden figure also slowly faded away. His smiling face was the last thing to disappear. Teacher. Hui Yu Hao shouted. He started tearing up in his spiritual sea. How could he not have realized that Electrolux died to save all of them? At that point in time, Sky Dream, the Ice Empress and the Snow Lady were all prepared to die. However, the only one to eventually sacrifice their life was Electrolux. Hui Yu Hao bawled sorrowfully, but he couldn't see Electrolux anymore. Only his memories continued to fuse with Hui Yu Hao's spiritual sea. They included the creation of the Snow Emperor spirit, and the incantations and experiences that he had comprehended in his lifetime. If it were possible, Hui Yu Hao was willing to be the one who died instead. However, he was very clear that none would survive if he didn't, since he was their host. But how could he consider everything logically at this point? His heart was only filled with intense anguish. He cried until everything turned dark. He lost consciousness. Hui Yu Hao dreamed the same dream as before. In this dream, the goddess of light brought him positivity again and comforted him. When Hui Yu Hao awoke from his dream, his spiritual sea had already been restored. Aside from the decrease in its size, everything had returned to normal. However, the 4 spiritual imprints that had once made his spiritual sea extremely lively were no longer there. His entire spiritual sea was quiet and desolate now. His soul power circulated normally again. Just like Electrolux had said, it was a success, and his soul power had finally reached the bottleneck at rank 50. He needed another soul ring to become a soul king. The Snow Emperor's spirit embryo was only connected to the Ice Jade Emperor Scorpion's martial soul, and didn't affect his spirit eyes. When he opened his eyes, the first thing Hui Yu Hao saw was long, pinkish-blue hair. His body jerked slightly, and he shouted "Goddess of Light," unwittingly. However, he soon realized that it wasn't her. That was because the familiar aura that he felt belonged to his good brother, Wang Dong. Hui Yu Hao's eyes were evidently not as bright as they had been when he first came to Clear Sky Castle. When he saw Wang Dong, he became less melancholic. This was the second time Wang Dong had been by his bedside in recent times. Wang Dong must be very worried about his condition. As usual, Wang Dong, don't sleep here. Go to your room to sleep. Hui Yuhao shook Wang Dong's shoulder slightly and woke him up. Oh. Wang Dong groaned and lifted his head. He opened his blurry eyes. Ah. Yuhao, you're awake. You scared me. Wang Dong was jolted awake when he saw Hui Yuhao sitting up. He grabbed onto his hand and spoke agitatedly. Hui Yuhao forced a smile and said, I'm sorry. I've brought so much trouble to you and everyone else. Wang Dong shook his head and said, don't say that. I heard from eldest and second uncle. The changes in your body were caused by the frigid jade essence bed. It's my fault. If I didn't bring you here and you didn't stay in this room, none of that would have happened. Hui Yuhao said, no, how can I blame you? No one could have seen this coming. Go and rest. I need some quiet time. All right. Wang Dong looked at Hui Yuhao. He remained silent for a while before asking, Yuhao, although I don't know what happened, I can sense that you've lost someone important. You were weeping and crying sorrowfully in your sleep. I wiped your tears several times. Can you tell me what happened? Hui Yuhao was in a momentary daze, before he eventually shook his head. Wang Dong, it's better not to know some things. I'm sorry, I can't tell you. You're right though, I did lose someone important to me. He was an important elder. As he spoke, tears flowed down Hui Yuhao's cheeks. Wang Dong said hurriedly, all right, I won't probe anymore. Don't be sad. I'll leave now. However, you must promise me to get better. You can't live in sorrow anymore. You're a big man, how can you let yourself drown in your sorrows? Okay. Hui Yuhao nodded his head in agreement. However, how could he express the pain in his heart with mere words? How could the pain be dispelled with just a few sentences? Wang Dong moved forward to hug him before turning and leaving. Hui Yuhao's pain diminished a little as he felt Wang Dong's sympathy. He stood up and came to his bedside. He gazed at the sea of clouds that was drifting slowly by and clenched his fists tightly. Teacher, I'll get stronger and restore your divine sense too. I'll work hard. He clenched his lips tightly, and Electrolux's voice and smile surfaced in his mind. Slowly, Hui Yuhao's eyes turned grayish-white. His demeanor also changed. As a dim light flashed, he exuded a special aura. It was cold and emotionless. A grayish soul ring slowly rose from his feet. Compared to an ordinary soul ring, this grayish soul ring was almost 50% larger. Behind him, a dim light projection also slowly surfaced. It had the appearance of Electrolux. Hui Yuhao's grayish-white eyes slowly turned completely white. He looked terrifying. As he turned to face the blurry, illusory projection, his white eyes started to tear up. Teacher, I'll make you clearer and enable your necromancy to prosper in this world. I will use necromancy to resist evil, and my strength to reduce the sorrow in this world. This video will end here. Thank you for watching.